What was that programme that used to be on Radio 4, Does He Take Sugar? And I've been exactly in that situation. A very nice lady came over to see if we wanted a cup of tea or something. But she wouldn't talk to me. She spoke to my friend and literally said that. Does she want a cup of tea and does she take sugar? My name is Jackie Clifton. We're here in the Royal College of Music and I'm a research fellow here at the college, specialising in looking at access to music and music courses for visually impaired musicians. It's almost like home here because I came here originally when I was 10 years old, and they have a junior school on Saturdays, so you go to normal school during the week and you come here to study music on Saturdays. And the junior department is still going on now, and we have some visually impaired students that I teach here on Saturdays. So they have all of their normal musical lessons and they come to me to learn Braille music notation and music technology, which personally I think is essential for any visually impaired person wanting to study music. I think a lot of people will be familiar with the JAWS screen reading software, and there are other screen reading programs that are available. And so we look at being able to access the music sequencing and recording programs with the screen reader, which is quite hard work sometimes, but we're making great improvements, and so lots of visually impaired musicians now are learning how to use computer music programs for composition and recording. When I first came here at the age of 10, I'd been learning to play the cello, and I still had fairly normal vision at that time. I was a bit short-sighted and wore glasses to correct that for reading, but you know, nothing terribly out of the way. Although one of my grandmothers had been blind, it was completely unrelated, my short-sightedness, to her eye condition. And I went all the way through school and studied here as a senior student, went out to work. There were not many opportunities for formal organ recitals, which was my first study instrument. And so I very quickly had to find other kinds of work as well, and worked with the Old Vic Theatre Company and then more commercial musical theatre companies, film and radio and television recording sessions, and that kind of work built up very quickly for me because I was very good at sight reading. And then out of nowhere in my early mid-30s, my vision deteriorated almost overnight. My optician sent me to Moorfields Eye Hospital, and they couldn't work out what had caused it. My retinas had been eaten away quite severely by a blood-borne virus, but they couldn't track down where it had come from, or indeed how it might be going to progress. Well, the progression is that I've been left with no useful vision at all, and that was the end of that, which might come across as being a little bit flippant, but strangely enough I didn't have a nervous breakdown, I didn't fly into a flat panic. I just kind of thought, well, you know, I can do this. I can't do the kind of work that I used to do, but I'll find other things to do, and that's what I did. So it sounds a bit odd, but I just somehow kind of took on board the lack of vision, applied for my first guide dog, which was the best thing I ever did. And this little one here is my fourth guide dog. And that has given me a great deal of independence to travel. So I quite quickly started travelling around all over the country to different universities and colleges and helping them to assess how they could teach a visually impaired student, which was very interesting, quite frustrating sometimes. But the whole idea of being able to teach a visually impaired student doesn't mean that you radically have to change the way you teach. You just have to not even change the language, but evolve a kind of way of describing things verbally for a visually impaired student that you wouldn't with another student. You just would say to a normally sighted student, well, watch me, whether it's bowing or embouchure or something like that. And I think that that's what most people find quite difficult, is how to describe things in words that they normally would just learn visually. So that's been quite an interesting experience, and we do have teaching classes on the degree course here at the Royal College of Music, and that's one of the things that I work on with them quite a lot. So hopefully we can give them a little bit of a clue as to how to describe things in words so that a visually impaired person can understand what they're doing. I use myself as a guinea pig quite a lot, which causes all sorts of hilarity. It's a common thought that if you lose your sight, suddenly, magically, your hearing is improved. Well, I personally don't think that your physical hearing is improved, but what I think does happen is that you learn to analyse what you hear in a different way, because you're getting information that most people would get visually by listening to things. So I think you can learn quite quickly. If I walk into a room, this room for example, when I first came in here before you got here, there were music stands everywhere and chairs and harps, and you could very easily just walk in and fall flat on your face because you'd crash into so many different things. But you do learn to hear, like a metal music stand and a cloth covered chair and a harp that's got a cover on it or hasn't got a cover on it. If you make a little bit of effort, you can very easily start to identify certain things, and learning your way around a new building or a new route somewhere, you tend to pick up on different features in the pavement, trees, buildings, traffic. From conversations that I've had with people, they do tend to be a bit frightened of taking on a blind student. It doesn't have to be a vastly different teaching experience to take on a blind child. I think that that will improve enormously, and then hopefully the child reaches a sort of standard where they could come to the junior school at a place like the Royal College of Music. I would like to think that there are more opportunities for people, but as in any area for any musician, it takes a lot of personal promotion and foot slogging to have the contacts, and I don't think that that's any different for a blind person than a sighted person, frankly. I lived in the 60s in Woodford, which is on the eastern edge of London, Greater London, and travelling in on the tube to come up to the Royal College of Music, for example, was really heavy going. because they'd be so crowded. In fact, going home was worse than coming in, because I would leave very early in the morning where it wasn't quite so busy. And of course I could see then, and so, you know, I don't know what it would have been like if I couldn't see them, because it was bad enough travelling around and trying to get about. I think now there's more people, it's more busy, there's so much traffic, and being able to walk down the pavement in a straight line and not crash into people with your cane, because sadly I think a lot of people don't understand what a white cane is for, and they just crash into you without even trying. And with a guide dog as well, there's been a number of times where somebody has got between me and my dog. However, the majority of people are very helpful, too helpful sometimes. In my personal experience, if you ask somebody for help, they talk to the dog. And what was that programme that used to be on Radio 4, Does He Take Sugar? And I've been exactly in that situation where I was at a function with a friend, and a very nice lady came over to see if we wanted a cup of tea or something. But she wouldn't talk to me. She spoke to my friend and literally said that. Does she want a cup of tea, and does she take sugar? And I think if you allowed yourself to get wound up by those things, you'd have a nervous breakdown. It's just not worth allowing those things to annoy you too much. In the 60s, there was a huge revolution in popular music. That freedom of thought that opened up at that time in music was, I think, more influential in other styles of music than any of us realised at the time. For a lot of people, again, especially in the performing arts, not just music, if you were a woman, you tended to get hit on quite a lot. But I was quite lucky that the other musicians that I worked with were very aware of my technical skills, and they knew that I was the musical director for this show or that show or whatever performance because of my technical skills, as opposed to the fact that I was a woman with long brunette, ready brunette hair, and I guess kind of quite pretty at the time. At that time, for me personally, if you worked hard and achieved a high standard, then you got equal rights and equal pay for that matter. So this is my MBE, which I think the original recommendation for it was from the Musicians Union, and it's basically for my work in music, but particularly working with visually impaired musicians. It wasn't anything that I expected to get this award, and it's kind of quite exciting. I forget about it for ages and ages, and every so often my memory goes back and I think, well, what did I do that was special that meant I got it? And I suppose just being a working musician and wanting everybody to have the same chances I had, just by fluke, a very privileged training as a musician at the Royal College of Music. And I think, you know, wanting to give that same opportunity to other people perhaps is what's at the bottom of it all, but it's quite exciting. And I've got a baby version of this, which I've never worn this except at the ceremony, but the kind of brooch size one I wore for my mother's funeral because I think that she was quite chuffed that I got it. So that's quite nice to wear for everyday things. Yeah, I think it's quite special.